Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight we are joined by host of Fleccas Talks, Austin Fleccas Fletcher, as well as the chief correspondent for El American News and host of Luna Talks, and Paulina Luna. Sorry, Anna. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. Guys, we're so excited to have you both here. We're going to jump right in. The Federalist reported that Twitter employees actively engage in misinformation propaganda to attack Florida and Texas. Essentially, an analysis by Johns Hopkins University showed that fully open states like Texas and Florida have fewer COVID cases than locked down Democrat-run states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. And yet a virus surge is on the way, and the states expected to suffer the worst, you guessed it, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. But that didn't sit too well with Twitter, so they intervened as the news stories started to gain traction online. Not that this should surprise any of us, right? What that really means is that when a person, topic, or event, or any news item starts trending on the platform, Twitter then steps in and has one of their liberal employees in San Francisco provide an explanation to that trending item. That is, if Twitter doesn't just silently remove the item from trending entirely, you know, like they did with that pesky Hunter Biden laptop story from the fall. And so Twitter puts themselves in a position to add context, provide a fact check, or put the focus on something that is more helpful with the Democrat narrative. In this case, pointing out that while fully open Florida and Texas have fewer COVID cases, many point out that it fails to clarify that the data is heavily influenced. All right, Fleccas, I'm coming straight to you. The power that these social media platforms hold is really shocking. It's a little bit scary, and I think we've all felt the impact of it in a variety of different ways. They claim to not be publishers, so they can play by a certain set of rules, and yet we see them pushing narratives as if they are CNN or MSNBC themselves. What do you make of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're realizing is that these tech companies don't have America's best interest. So when we're seeing things like this play out with COVID and all these new rules and how they're kind of adjusting the narrative, it's really to keep people in the dark and keep people in the gray area confused and unsure. Because a normal person would say, how have these lockdowns been effective? How is it scientifically, good to be locked down? And I want to see the data. I want to see how this plays out. And instead of us looking into it and investigating and looking into the science, the tech companies would rather pin us against each other. So now people in these lockdown states will say, oh, I can't open my business. I can't have my kids go back to school like normal until people from Florida, start behaving and start locking down, getting the vaccine, wearing their masks. So instead of having everyday Americans kind of realize what's going on, bigger picture, learn and improve, they're actually having us fight against each other so we can't realize who the real opponent of the American dream is.
Yeah, and it's almost as though they don't want us to have any critical thinking whatsoever. The second you start thinking for yourself, it's almost like they jump in and they erase everything and they say, no, this is how you're supposed to think. Anna, you recently ran for Congress in Florida. You have almost 200,000 followers on Twitter. And I recall during the campaign how you would ask Twitter publicly to verify your account, but received nothing but silence. Between misinformation, fake accounts, and making sure voters are hearing directly from their candidates wanting to represent them, this seems like a very important thing to do. In fact, Twitter themselves, ahead of the 2020 election, said that they were going to start verifying the campaign accounts of candidates who had qualified for primary elections for the House of Representatives, Senate, or governor, and yet nothing. You qualified for your primary, you won your primary, and you fought up until election day for your general election, and nothing from Twitter?
Absolutely. In fact, it was so bad that actually during the campaign from my official account, Diego Aria, who was the former United Nations Security Council president and an anti-socialist Venezuelan politician formerly, actually had posted my account. They suspended it. And so what ended up ultimately happening is my campaign, my team, and then our attorneys decided that it would be best if we filed a complaint with the FEC. The FEC then had 6 months in order to respond. They did not respond correctly. So as of next week, we'll be announcing on Wednesday a pretty big thing. It will be a class action lawsuit for illegal campaign finance contribution by a corporation against myself and basically contributing illegally to my opponents. And that's not a free speech issue. That's a direct involvement of this corporation taking it upon themselves to aid an opponent, get involved, and interfere illegally with elections.
Wow. Well, I'm happy to hear you're doing that because, guys, it's felt like that these social media platforms are really untouchable. We obviously know the way they swayed the 2020 election, at least the way I referenced it earlier, but they covered up this, specifically the Hunter Biden laptop story. And Fleccas, I see that you've got New York Post font on your shirt there. So obviously talking about Governor Cuomo. We're going to talk about him in a second. But it was the New York Post that broke that story, that put it out, and Twitter suppressed it. They wouldn't run it. They basically would just shut your account down if you talked about it. Same thing happened on Facebook. I mean, these are very scary times, guys, that we live in. Fleccas, do you feel like we're ever going to get on the other side of this? I'm glad that Anna's doing, what she's doing, but do you think we're ever going to get in front of what these social media companies are trying to do to silence us?
I hope so. I do think the way these last few events over the last few months have played out will lead to more people waking up. And as more people wake up, it'll be harder for these social media companies to lie and censor and keep the rest of the people engaged. So while it's unfortunate now, I think the attraction to other platforms that will be decentralized and will be fair and will not censor will be strong. And once we get established on those platforms, I think we'll be able to have the foundation we need to go further with these social media companies. So people can kind of leave the Twitter behind and join a new platform, whether it's Parler or Gab or any of these new platforms. And maybe in the beginning, it'll be kind of an echo chamber of mostly conservative people. But as the average American politically centered person wakes up, they'll kind of be attracted to these platforms because they'll have the ability to go the distance because they'll be, foundationally fair and balanced as opposed to what the big tech companies are doing now.
And Anna, let me ask you this. Are you, to Fleccas' point, are you on other platforms and verified on any of them?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm on every other platform I can be on. And in fact, I am mostly verified on those other accounts. And it is important too that, especially with the targeting that's taking place of conservatives by big tech, that we are also using those platforms to stand up other voices because they can't silence us all.
Amen to that. They're trying to do it every single day. Well, I referenced him a moment ago, but Emmy Award winner Andrew Cuomo, also current governor of New York, and now 9-time and counting accusee of sexual harassment, continues to be in the headlines. While giving his first public appearance in months and responding to accusations, he said things like, "People want attention and I didn't do anything wrong." But the most baffling part in the Cuomo saga has to be the lack of action by the news media and fellow Democrats as all of this continues. Not only that, guess who led Joe and Kamala's White House coronavirus call for the nation's governors? You guessed it, Andrew Cuomo, the same man who has been guilty of bringing sick COVID patients into New York nursing homes and then trying to cover it up. In some instances, leaving threatening messages to assemblymen who dared to speak up about the nursing home reports. So, Fleccas, do Democrats believe they're untouchable now with control of the White House and the fake news media?
I think they do, and that's always been their goal. And what we're seeing with Andrew Cuomo and how he's being propped up, he's basically the king of the clown world in a way. I have my shirt that says "Arrest Cuomo," so that's like one view of it. I think he should be in jail for what he did. And they know that he did not act properly. They know he wasn't a good leader, but their best option is to keep people kind of confused and in the gray area, like we talked about before. So if you prop him up as the leader of the call, the governor that everyone should look up to, the person who's doing so well, an average viewer who's not really fully engaged might see that and go, all right, one side wants to arrest Cuomo, the other side's propping him up. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and it's not, unfortunately. So by leading with him and showing him off and giving him awards, the average person's able to stay in the dark for longer because they don't really know. They're like, oh, they wouldn't give him an award if he killed all those people. But in the clown backwards world they were living in, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it's just so the hypocrisy is so crazy. The way basically everything that the Democrats accuse Republicans of doing, they themselves are doing, and then they just flat out lie about their own. Anna, I mean, you and Fleccas both live in the great state of Florida. Do you think Joe and Kamala could have found a better governor? I don't know, maybe like Ron DeSantis to lead this call?
I'm sure they could have, but unfortunately, that would require them to admit that Republicans have been handling this a whole lot better than the Democrat platform the entire time during this awful COVID lockdown that they put this country through. And it's really awful because we do have video, or was it the audio evidence of Cuomo making very weird comments about hot dogs. And then there's photo evidence of him and the accusers. And so it's not that these are unfounded allegations. We have the evidence, but the fact is that unless it's a Republican, they don't want to accept the fact that sometimes bad people need to be held accountable.
Yeah, when then they box themselves in when they tell us believe all women, well, then we should believe every single woman who has come out against Andrew Cuomo. Everybody should have an opportunity to be heard and have their voices heard and say what they need to say for sure. But this is the problem when you make blanket statements like that, although they probably will never learn their lesson on that. Well, Joe Biden has released his climate plan, and industry experts shockingly, watch this, argue it isn't sustainable in the long run. It's going to put jobs at risk and cause tax hikes for Americans, as though what they're trying to do to us isn't egregious enough. Experts and recent studies have laid out what would need to change by 2030 for us to reach Joe's goal. Here we go. Cut out 90% of red meat from our diet. That's basically one burger a month for you Americans, maximum. That's it. Everybody gets one burger. You better really enjoy it. More than half of new cars would need to be electric within the next decade. The average electric vehicle, by the way, costs $55,000. A quarter of all homes would need to replace their heat pumps, cost of about $5,600 for 1 in 4 households. And obviously, electric bills would increase significantly, cost taxpayers around $3,500 extra dollars a year. Anna, between Joe's plan and AOC's Green New Deal, I don't even think Democrats are living in reality. What is this?
It's absolutely crazy. I consider myself a green conservative. And if I can know, I've done various different works with nonprofits that are actually helping to contribute to the environment. And the fact is that if they really cared about saving our planet, they wouldn't be shipping all of our industry to places like China that are busy destroying it. And in addition to that, as someone who is a former vegetarian, I can tell you that I will never go back to that lifestyle and that I wouldn't ever want to legislate it on the rest of the American people.
It's so crazy. Fleccas, we know that President Trump warned us. He talked about it throughout the campaign that Joe would kill fracking and oil and all those jobs involved in it. Joe denied it, and the fake news refused to acknowledge it all the times in the primary that Joe said that he would do just that. So should we even be surprised at this point? He basically told us what he was going to do.
Yeah, I don't think we should be surprised. And it is unfortunate because right now people need as much help as they can get. They don't want to be told how to heat their house, what kind of cars they can drive, what exactly they can do. Like one burger a month, I 2X'd that yesterday alone. So yesterday alone, I already did double the monthly limit.
So the lock them up. Oh my God.
Exactly. So the average person is not going to like that. And, like we said before, the Democrats' best way to accomplish their goals is to kind of deceive and keep people in the dark. But an average person will see these prices go up, and their number one thing is going to be their pocketbook and their wallet. So, maybe they voted for President Biden because they didn't really like President Trump or whatever it was. Now I think there's going to be a really big difference when it comes to the next election because they're going to see firsthand what exactly Joe Biden did and, how much of an overreach the government is really going for right now.
Well, gosh, and we all want to do the right thing. We all want to make sure that the environment is healthy and that we're not destroying it for future generations. But actually, under President Trump, we had the cleanest air and cleanest water in America that we've had over the past 3 decades. Nobody wants to acknowledge that. And Anna, you point out something that is so, so important, and you never hear the Democrats talk about it. Until we start holding China and India and places like that accountable for their, huge emissions that are so, so bad for our environment, just those countries alone, what are we even talking about? We're talking about limiting Americans' red meat consumption. I don't think people want to be told how to live their lives anymore. Gosh, we for the past year have been living under lockdowns and just being suppressed at every point. They're trying to tell kids to put masks on. All of it's so crazy. Do we want the government telling us, Anna, what we should be doing? And you do make a good point. until we address those big violators, why are we even doing all of this?
No, in fact, I always tell people the best way to handle yourself and your family is through your individual thought and process. And that's something that they don't want. They want to control every single aspect of our lives. We saw that with the COVID lockdowns. But, going back to what China's really done to our economy and the long-term implication it has as keeping us a world superpower, China does not have our invested interests. They are every single day, whether or not we realize it, are attacking us through cyber warfare, through intelligence gathering, and in the tech race. And so it's something that we are going to have to keep focus on, is maintaining our autonomy, whether it's through manufacturing, whether it's through our own industry with energy. And honestly, this whole, climate accord that Joe Biden entered back into, all it did was keep America's hands tied behind our back. Meanwhile, China's manufacturing is booming. We're losing jobs, and they're absolutely destroying not just our ozone, but they're destroying our oceans. And that's one of the, I think, most natural resources that we should be focusing on and really ensuring that it's safe for the future generations of our country and the world.
I heard that because of all the masks that have been discarded, that it's going to be like the #1 pollutant or something over the next couple of years, which, you have to question that. And Fleccas, I got to tell you, I filled up my gas tank yesterday. I had to go get gas. My tank was probably a quarter full. I don't even want to tell you how much it cost me to go fill it up. And this is just the beginning of the Biden presidency. It's probably going to get worse from here, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's exactly what makes people wake up the most, is filling up their cars, taking their kids to school, going to work, the day-to-day stuff. And I think people are going to realize that the Biden administration does not have a plan. They're more of a teardown, and they want to replace it with, we'll lean into solar. And we all know how inefficient that can be. We've seen it in Europe, how it doesn't fully work, the windmills. We all know that. So these half-baked ideas are now kind of coming to fruition, and they're not going to play out that well. So while it's unfortunate in the short term, I think in the long term, it'll lead to a 2022 election victory for the House and Senate, and then a 2024 presidential election victory for the Republicans as well.
Well, we can all get behind that. That is for sure. All right, turning to the Washington Post, one of our biggest fans, as we all know, owned by Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos, decided that they are no longer going to keep a fact-checking database for Joe Biden. Washington Post fact checker Glenn Kessler said in a tweet about the Biden fact-check database that they do not plan to extend beyond 100 days. They've learned their lesson. Well, the Washington Post kept a database just to remind everybody through all 4 years of President Trump's time in office, but defends no longer doing so for Joe because, and I quote, "The Joe Biden era has offered a return to a more typical pattern when it comes to a commander-in-chief and his relationship with the facts, one that features frequent spin and obfuscation or exaggeration." Fleccas, the Washington Post uses the slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness." Was this just foreshadowing?
So yeah, exactly. Democracy dies in darkness, and that's how they justified the 4 years of fact-checking to the point where it's not even fact-checking, it's just narrative adjusting and, context removing. And it was actually going against President Trump and the administration, and they were actually promoting lies and basically gaslighting the right. So it's very interesting to see them go away from this fact-checking approach, because that kind of seemed like their entire business model for the last few years. So hopefully it leads to less viewership, less engagement, and then maybe it'll affect them on the bottom line in general. Now that President Trump's out of office, they have less things to get excited about, less things to lie about. So it's kind of on us with this opportunity to kind of get our information out there best we can and win over those people in the middle who maybe were trying to play both sides the last few years.
If I weren't so involved in this and I hadn't had stories written about me that were just patently false by outlets such as the Washington Post, it might be hard for me to fully appreciate what a big deal this is. But Anna, I have to tell you, these people, it's basically like they're out for blood when it comes to Donald Trump, to our family, Republicans, anybody that leans conservative. It's become more of basically just an opinion paper than a newspaper, I would say. So why do you think they would do this? Was it a little too helpful for people to have a database of all of Joe and Kamala's lies? Because they've told a few whoppers themselves.
I mean, I think that the whole reason that they did the fact checking to begin with is for an excuse in collusion with big tech to suppress all of our voices. And the fact is that in the first 100 days in office, not only has the Biden-Harris administration been completely not competent, but then they ripped off former ideas from the previous administration with President Trump. And in addition to that, what they're doing is they're suppressing information, especially in regards to what's happening at our southern border. If I could note, I had actually posted a tweet with the Connex boxes that Joe Biden has now put these separated migrant children in. And it was actually an image that I actually took from one of these left-leaning outlets. And the Associated Press fact-checked me and said that it was missing context. But they didn't do that when they were putting out false information saying that Trump was putting kids in cages and trying to paint Republicans and conservatives as xenophobic and anti-immigrant because we didn't agree with open borders and human trafficking. So what they're doing right now, it's not just sad, it's not just disgusting because it's not journalism and it's not reporting, but it's dangerous because people are getting hurt. They aren't being told the correct information. And because they're lying, the American people are suffering.
Yeah, it's so true. I don't know if either of you saw the movie Wag the Dog. Did you ever see that movie?
No.
Okay, so it's probably from the 90s. I'm like 100 years old, apparently. But basically in this movie, they manufacture a war and they just run it on all the media outlets as though there's a war overseas so that Americans believe that they are in a war to basically manipulate them into doing things. I almost feel like sometimes we are in a movie like that when they are able to manipulate things to the point that they have and they continue to do. And Anna, you're right. It is dangerous. It's dangerous not just because now what do we see at our southern border? We see that we have thousands of people that are making this really treacherous, dangerous journey north. Women are sexually assaulted, at least a quarter of them, probably more like a third or half of them on their way to the southern border. We see these terrifying videos of children that are being dragged here by coyotes, thrown over 20-foot walls, crammed in these packed spaces with all of these other kids. It is so sad to see this happening, but you're not getting the full picture out there unless you really look for it, unless you really go out of your way to try and find real information. And then it's even suppressed. Don't even bother Googling it because Google is probably suppressing a lot of that stuff too. It's really, really scary because the future of America truly is at stake. It can't be overemphasized. And for both of you, for Anna and Fleccas, I want to say thank you guys because you guys are out there every day trying to get real information out to the American people, trying to fight for the future of this country. I know they don't make it easy. I know that they try every step of the way to stop all of us from doing it. But I really have to say thank you to you guys. You guys are very powerful and influential on a lot of people. So really, it's going to make a big, big difference, I think, in 22 and 24 and for the future of this country. So to both of you, Fleccas, Anna, thank you guys for all that you continue to do on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you to you. And then also, congrats on the show. This is exactly what we need to win the people over, is we have to win the culture. So if we can offer a more appealing community and culture and be more funny and more enjoyable to hang out with and more rational and normal, I think long-term that's what's going to win. So a show like yours, The Right View, is the perfect replacement for the View on TV.
The real
and
View.
I hope people see that.
Thank you. I heard, side note, that The Talk apparently has the lowest ratings of any daytime show right now. So too bad. They've made a couple of missteps over there as well. All that to say thank you to you guys for coming on. We're going to keep everybody informed. Fleccas, thank you. We're going to continue to do the right thing and give you real information. So Anna, Fleccas, thanks for joining us. And to everybody at home, thank you as always. We'll see you right back here next time for more of The Right View.